Earlier, Chum spent $4,000 on 3 samurai swords because he thinks he's a samurai expert.
Chumlee hits the pawn shop's biggest jackpot. The American TV show Pawn Stars shows the daily activities and the running of the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas, Nevada. The pawn shop is a 24-hour family business that was opened in 1989 and operated by the late Richard Harrison, the Old Man. Ever since the passing of the Old Man, the pawn shop has been run by his son, Rick Harrison, and his grandson, Corey Harrison. Another person who has some sort of authority in the shop is Corey's childhood friend and fan favorite, Austin Lee Russell, popularly known as Chumlee. He began working at the gold and silver pawn shop at the age of 21 and has thus been considered an integral cast member of the Pawn Stars reality TV show. On the show, Chumlee is often portrayed to be a not-so-bright individual and sometimes makes mistakes that cost the pawn shop a lot of money. However, on some occasion, he has proved himself to be a great salesman and ended up making some pretty impressive bargains. On today's video, we will be taking a look at these occasions as we will be talking about times Chumlee hit the pawn shop's biggest jackpot. But before we go into the video, kindly hit the subscribe button, like the video, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any juicy updates from us. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. Samurai swords. Swords are a core part of human history. They date back to the olden days when our ancestors defeated their enemies with these self-forged weapons. Due to this reason, swords are one of the most common buys on the Pawn Stars. The problem Rick and the crew encounter with buying swords is that finding a true antique sword is rare, and in the process of searching for one, you may end up getting scammed and buying a fake. In one of the episodes of the show, a customer brought in a pair of samurai swords for sale. On this very day, Rick had to run some other errands and left Chumlee to attend to the shop. On seeing the swords, Chumlee was blown away and immediately wanted to buy them without confirming if they were fakes or not. He ended up following his gut and bought the pair of swords for $4,000. When Rick and Corey found out Chumlee had bought the pair of swords without authentication, they were furious and decided to take the swords to a local expert. On getting to the expert, he revealed to them that the swords were indeed authentic and very much valuable. Imagine how relieved Chumlee was. He had hit a jackpot. According to the expert, the swords were made in the 1400s and were worth $13,000.
Got those?
Yes, I did.
Didn't call anybody and spent over $3,800 on swords.
White sword. Still on the cases of swords, we all know how much Rick and the crew love swords. So much that sometimes they buy swords from customers and then decide not to sell them. In one of the episodes of Pawn Stars, Rick purchased a white samurai sword and immediately fell in love with it. He then sent the sword to Japan so it could be refurbished and restored. After 2 years, the 17th century katana was sent back to the shop, and Rick made it clear to everyone, especially Chumlee, that it was not for sale. If you are a big-time follower of the reality TV show, you'll know that Chumlee sometimes doesn't listen to Rick's instructions. This case was one of those occasions. The katana was placed in a show glass in the shop so customers would admire it in the hope of luring them to buy other items in the pawn shop. On this day, a man who goes by the name Dana White walked into the show with the sole purpose of owning the refurbished katana. For those of you who know who Dana White is, you would know it's quite impossible to say no to a man like him. For those of you who don't know him, Dana Frederick White Jr. is an American businessman and the president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship UFC, the largest mixed martial arts organization in the world. He is not only powerful, but also said to have a net worth of over $500 million. After much persuasion, Chumlee decided to sell him the katana for $30,000, and he also sold him other swords, increasing the profit made to about $70,000. Cha-ching!
Can we do 9?
Yeah, I'll give you 9 for it.
Sweet.
Spotting the fake. In this next trade, Chumlee didn't make profit from it, but he was so intellectual that even that Harrisons had to stop and stare. On this particular episode, Corey and Chumlee were on duty in the shop when a pair of customers walked in claiming they had an authentic game-worn Willie Mays jersey. Willie Howard Mays, popularly known as the Say Hey Kid is an American former professional baseball center fielder who played for the San Francisco Giants and the New York Mets. Mays was regarded as one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and to own a memorabilia belonging to him was a pawn shop's owner's biggest dream. When the two were looking at the jersey, Chumlee felt it was too neat to be a game-worn jersey belonging to the baseball legend and told Corey something was seriously wrong with the trade. In a twist that later came to bite Corey in the ass, he didn't listen to Chumlee and ended up buying the jersey for $31,000. The pawn shop lost thousands of dollars on the fake jersey, and it was all because Corey didn't listen to Chumlee. Marvel comic artwork. Comic books are not a very common item in the gold and silver pawn shop, but that doesn't mean the shop hasn't seen its fair share of comic book sales. One of such sales was handled by Chumlee himself. On this particular episode of the TV series, a man walked through the door claiming he had a piece of original comic book artwork of Spider-Man that was also signed by the great Stan Lee and artist John Romita, whose son is currently working with DC Comics. Seeing the Stan Lee signed comic, Chumlee's heart skipped in excitement, but he also knew he had to verify the authenticity of the comic. He then remembered that Stan Lee was in town, and who better to verify the comic than the one and only Stan Lee. He took the comic and the customer to see Stan, and recalled himself and John signing the comic, hence proving it was not a fake. Chumlee ended up buying the comic for $5,000. Even Rick would be proud of him for this deal. The Chumlee brand. Chumlee might not look it, but he has one of the greatest business minds on the show. After working with the Harrisons for a while, he noticed he was quickly becoming a fan favorite on the show. And what did he do next? Chumlee decided to create a brand for himself, which, if you ask me, is pretty smart. He formed his own company, selling novelty items of his own design and arranged in his personal appearances. His sales of his merchandise surpassed that of other stars on the show. Due to his popularity, after a few years running the company, he sold half of his company's stake to Rick for $155,000 in 2010. This was by far Chumlee's biggest jackpot on the show, and even Rick acknowledged this fact. With that, we have come to the end of today's video. What are your thoughts about Chumlee and his business approach? Share them with us in the comment section below. Until next video, stay safe guys, bye!